Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news, which as usual has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully, you're having an amazing day. We've got a couple of very interesting stories to get through in today's video. I'd like to start things out with one I actually missed yesterday, so thanks to a couple of people who actually DM'd me about this one. And this is Intel's Tiger Lake, because there have been a series of promotional videos which have actually leaked out courtesy of the Twitter user Walking Cat, and these are, well, detailing numerous aspects of Intel's next generation, that is of course generation 11 CPUs. So the first thing I'd like to say is that I really love the new Intel Core logo. The only thing if I had to pick on it, the only thing that kind of irks me is that the E is falling outside the darker box. There is like the nya factor there, I won't lie. But other than that, I do think it looks really cool. I actually really like the new branding. And these are, once again, for the Tiger Lake architecture. The series will offer, at least from what we're seeing here, 4 cores with up to 8 threads. And this is going to operate with a 28 watt power envelope. And there will also be lower power series of these as well. And these will be Tiger Lake UP3. Tiger Lake uses the Willow Cove core architecture, and this is combined with Intel's XE-LP, once again LP standing for low power. So this of course is kind of contrary to the discrete GPUs, which are going to be the high performance devices. The performance of these actually is looking really good. The teaser itself is hitting, the CPU is hitting 4.8 gigahertz, which is actually pretty damn impressive. At least I think so. It's much higher than what we saw with Ice Lake. As always with teasers and promotional material, I will wait for the actual final release. What we do know is that the IPC from its predecessor from the 10th generation isn't exactly staggering, but it is still reasonable. I believe it's like 7%-ish on average, and once again, we have higher clock frequencies as well. Assuming it can hit those sustained with heavy workloads, and obviously we don't as well know how that clock frequency will be affected if more cores are being impacted. So for example, if only one core boosts to 4.8 but then it like drops down to, let's say, 4.1 or something like that, if you load up all of the cores, then we have to take that into consideration. This also reminds me, because these chips seem like they could be reasonable-ish at light gaming. I suspect that if you do want to do gaming to any higher level capacity, you probably would still want to go with like an NVIDIA GeForce discrete GPU on your laptop or whatever. But Ryan Shrout, who of course now works at Intel, has previously demoed that Battlefield could hit 30-ish FPS, and that was at 1080p. I covered that a while ago. I think that was in June. It was June or July, I believe it was June. Anyway, that of course was still quite pre-production hardware, and we don't know what the state of the drivers are. So that's pretty good, considering that Battlefield 5 isn't exactly, like League of Legends or something like that, where it's not exactly demanding. I think that these chips could be interesting. The only issue, of course, is that they will be facing an extraordinarily aggressive AMD. And now we're going to mosey our way to Sony, as there are a couple of very interesting stories that are doing the rounds. The first is for a possible next PlayStation showing. And this originally started out because Jace Skell had been teasing that there would be a event happening not on 9. Now, what is 9? Does that mean 9 days, or does that mean September 9th? Well, we now have a kind of an update to this, because the official PlayStation channels, not all of them, at least as of the time I'm recording this, but Latin America as well as Australia have actually had private videos appear in their playlists. Again, you cannot view these because, well, they're private, but it's a very good sign that Sony are up to something because, you know, it's kind of like, it seems like they're getting ready for a big announcement. Furthermore, if you do a quick Google of PS1 launch date, or such a search, 9th of September 1995 will pop up, because that is actually when we saw the console launch in North America. It was actually predating this in Japan, but in North America it was the 9th of September 1995, with Europe getting it slightly later still in September, once again 1995. So it's not like that date for Sony doesn't have some meaning. What we don't know though is what Sony will be announcing at this event. Will it be like a full teardown of the PlayStation 5, along with perhaps being able to pre-order one and full trailers, or will it just be the pre-order date, or will it just be more gameplay? We honestly don't know at this point. Hopefully, Sony does reveal all at this point, because I'm sure most of us would agree that it would be about bloody time. And what I'm about to say is some level of speculation, but there have been a couple of SSDs recently which have actually been announced. One of them, for example, is a 980 Pro PCIe 4, and this is from Samsung. It goes up to 1 terabyte in capacity and has 7 gigabytes per second read speeds, which is, I'm sure you'll agree, pretty damn fast. What we understand from Mark Cerny is that the form factor of a PCIe 4 NVMe drive has to be slimmer. It can't have like a really massive heatsink because it will not fit within the console. The second thing that Cerny mentioned in the Road to PS5 event was that the drive needs to be faster than the SSD inside the PS5, and this is because that the PlayStation 5 SSD has more priority queues, whereas a consumer grade SSD does not have that. It only has 2, whereas the PS5 has more. So they obviously need to account for that overhead. This is pure speculation on my part, but I wonder if one of the reasons that Sony haven't been able to have an announcement up until now is because they've needed to wait for these drives to be formally announced so that they can actually say, here are some drives that you can purchase if you want to expand the storage capacity of the PlayStation 5. Once again, this is not inside information. I am just spitballing, guessing here, but to me that would make sense with some of the timings we're seeing. And while we're on the subject of PlayStation, let's discuss something more technical, shall we? Thanks, by the way, to a Twitter user who actually sent me this particular thing over by the name of EBN. So thanks again for the DM. But in this particular story, it's actually from, well, the same corporate report as yesterday. I actually managed to miss this piece of information. Oops. Sony did mention that in this report that they want to streamline data and asset management for the PlayStation 5. As we all know, fast speeds are great and all, but you also need the software solution to be able to support all of this. And I'm going to read this quote verbatim. Custom I/O systems with integrated high-speed custom SSDs, for instance, can substantially reduce load times, dramatically changing game experiences for users. The PS5 supports ray tracing technology to simplify the rendering process, a major burden for game creators. For ray tracing to be effective, it must be fast, requiring not only superb hardware performance, but excellent software to make the most of the hardware. To draw the best from the hardware performance, we are building data structures essential to faster ray tracing and developing libraries to offer game creators whose voices will be considered throughout the process. End quote. Actually, while I'm quoting things from Sony, I might as well also add in the descriptions for the Tempest engine. We apply the Tempest engine 3D audio technology to make players feel presence and locality without high-end audio systems, with priority on dialogue between the player and the world the game creates. On controllers, we are adding haptic feedback technology that expressively communicates physical sensations to the player. We believe that these technologies will offer game experiences that appeal to multiple senses and give players an unprecedented feeling of immersion." End quote. I will say that the Xbox Series X also has some really good audio components. I'm actually doing or writing the analysis for the second part of my Hot Chips coverage. I really like what Microsoft have done with the audio components for the Xbox Series X. It seems that they're actually really good. But for Sony, they've gone a very interesting route too. They've essentially taken an RDNA compute unit, RDNA2 compute unit, made customization, we don't fully know what, removed the caches so that the CU basically needs to do direct memory access, DMA, to the main system memory. And it's a quite unique approach and very powerful. What we don't know fully, though, is what Sony's solution is for this. They still have mentioned that there's a ton of stuff that they need to kind of formalize and go deeper into. But I do think that audio for the next generation is going to be a very critical aspect of immersion. And obviously as well, it's going to be perhaps just as important as graphics and visuals, especially when it comes to the PlayStation's VR solutions. PSVR 2, of course, is going to heavily utilize this because, yeah, it's great to have like high frame rates and all that, but if the audio doesn't match, you've kind of got this really weird, like, I don't know how to describe it. It just breaks the immersion. It just really does. Anyway, getting back to the crux of the matter here with the ray tracing side of the equation, if you recall, in my PlayStation 5 APU bring up, I said that I believe that the PlayStation 5 has some custom components to the ray tracing. Now, I got told that the clock frequency of the ray tracing cores of the PlayStation 5 are separate to the compute units. But I also did get told that there were some other things as well that I wasn't sure of. And obviously, the problem with leaks, honestly, at the end of the day, is you don't get a full picture. Which means either you can get the wrong end of the stick, or you can just be seeing like a small preview of what's actually really happening. But what essentially this seems to be focused on is, yes, they are mentioning hardware, but they're also really focusing on the software. And this is not surprising to me because essentially, when it comes to the consoles, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, they all push their own APIs, their own solutions, their own development kits in an effort to aid developers to be as efficient and effective as possible to code their experiences. So, for example, Microsoft are using DirectX ray tracing, and that is an awesome solution, and I suspect that the Xbox implementation is also a little bit different for the PC for obvious reasons. For one, for example, they don't need to worry about, let's say, I don't know, a GeForce graphics card. They know that it's RDNA2 based, and that's all they need to concern themselves with, so they can kind of make that API as efficient as possible for a console setting. For Sony, though, they, for quite a long time now, have had a couple of different methods with their APIs. For graphics, for example, they've got a higher level API, which you can basically say is quite similar to like DirectX 11, and then you've got a lower level API, which is more kind of close to like DirectX 12, although functionality is slightly different because, well, you know, both consoles are slightly different. For the PlayStation 5, it's kind of the same to what my understanding is. So you can kind of code to the metal if you so desire, but then you can also, to a lesser extent, just kind of let the system handle most of it. So if you're creating a game which isn't particularly strenuous to run, why would you spend all of that time really optimizing the code? It just doesn't make sense if you're just creating like, an indie platformer. Not criticizing indie platformers, I'm just saying that, you could run that thing at like 16K on either of the next generation consoles. My point being, though, what they seem to be discussing here are data structures and development libraries. So I lack enough insight because we don't know what they're exactly specifically stating. I can make a guess that they're referring to things like BVH, but we can't see exactly what they've been doing with the BVH and data structures. So BVH, for those who don't know, basically means bounding volume hierarchy. This essentially means that when pixels are being thrown into the screen, as Razor being thrown into the screen, they basically try to figure out what rays intersect with what pixels. In other words, what light source is intersecting with what pixels. So then, if that light source is affecting a visible pixel, then the GPU can continue. It basically uses like a sorting algorithm to do this. NVIDIA did a pretty good job, by the way, of really breaking that down with the Turing demo, which is what I'm going to be showing here for a couple of the slides with the Bunny of Doom. But long story short, you can almost think of it as going down like a box structure. What Sony seems to be stating is that they've made these data structures more efficient. So this is where it becomes quite interesting to me, because it kind of reminds me a little bit about what we saw from the company AdShare, which is, by the way, someone have interviewed previously. And basically, Reuven, who is the CEO, when I was discussing things with him, was mentioning that NVIDIA basically don't have the most efficient BVH technology. That's why that with their tech, they can run things even on just software-based ray tracing. But what we do understand is that there were games companies that were kind of licensing their tech. So there's a few possibilities here. One, some of this tech has been licensed from AdShare to Sony, and then they're using that with some type of tweaks. And obviously this is them being run on hardware, so hardware-based ray tracing, but with AdShare's more efficient BVH structures. I don't know if that's the case. I'm purely spitballing. When I asked Reuven if it's for a next-generation console, he said something like, think current generation. I can't remember his exact wording, but he seemed to dismiss it for the next generation. Then again, it's possible that he just didn't want to talk about that, so I'll link his interview in the video description. Another possibility, and to be honest, the more likely one for me, is that Sony have basically done what console manufacturers do, and optimized the best they can with their APIs. And obviously, the more efficient the data structure is, the faster ray tracing is, because it can essentially sort through the scene faster. Once again, it's not just about hardware. If the API sucks, or there are software issues, it can't be as fast. It's just, the convoy is always as fast as the slowest ship. So there are a lot of questions I have with what they've described here, because honestly, this leaves me with more questions, honestly, than what I had to begin with. And even Microsoft themselves have stated that they have done some level of customization for the Xbox Series X for its ray tracing too. I'm very curious how this compares both consoles against RDNA 2 Desktop. It would be kind of funny if RDNA 2 Desktop was actually inferior to both consoles in ray tracing capability, compute unit versus compute unit. Once again, all we can do is wait and see, but I find this really interesting, honestly. And I'm going to be fascinated to see when Sony finally reveals this stuff, which bloody well is taking long enough, what they've actually done under the hood. Because this statement is so ambiguous, we don't really know much other than more efficient data structure. Anyway, I think that just about does it for this particular video. I'm going to mosey off as I'm currently in the middle of writing this Xbox Hot Chips conference analysis. Well, part 2 of it to be precise. I'm going to be breaking down the audio, memory components and some other bits and bobs. And Amy also has tons of stuff to do as well. She's just got back from a trip with her partner, so she wants to kind of relax, and she's going to be doing the editing for this video while I'm working on the script, as we're kind of in 2 separate residences. She lives quite a distance from me, actually, so I don't want to take up too much of her time this evening editing, as I said, she's just come back from the family. But I would like to spend just one moment to thank you all for the recent support. The number of subscribers on the channel has just absolutely exploded recently, so I'd like to thank you all for, all of that support. And if you're a longer term subscriber as well, thanks very much for sticking with us. And with all of that said, thank you very much, take care of yourselves, bye for now.